our model that we came up with last month when we all got together was a fairly chaotic model where we had the major resources within the university sort of facing outward, not really looking at each other, and creating both positive outcomes and negative outcomes in the wake of their work. So we called it Going Nowhere Fast, and when we came up with a creative title for our prototype number 2, a month ago we decided we wanted to call it Engineered Functional Interdependence, basically creating a system that required these groups to work together in some way. Engaged food work at the university has outcomes, right? We have community-defined outcomes that are important to our community partners. And so we decided that we would focus on human health outcomes, community development outcomes, economic development outcomes, and environmental health outcomes as defined by our community partners. Those are really the key primary focus areas for them. And then from there, we looked outward and said, okay, who at the university is doing this work in these different areas? We know for sure that extension really does all of it in some way or another. In a program or another. And then from there, what other groups within the university also work in some of these different areas. We noticed that there's a lot of groups really looking at the human health outcomes, so Healthy Foods, Healthy Lives, program for health disparities and research. The School of Public Health has a number of tracks in that area. We noticed that in economic development, we had some folks in CFANS, especially in applied economics, and the new food systems major is really focusing in that area. We have kind of a lack of effort or identified effort that we were thinking about in the community development outcomes area. And then in environmental health, we know that some folks in CFAN's research areas as well as in the Institute and the Environment are also looking at that area. So in terms of the work of the hub, we would provide an opportunity, obviously, to network. We want to identify where we're working to create efficiencies, to eliminate duplications of effort, but also to really identify the gaps and to really spend our time together focusing on how do we create a resource within the university that addresses that gap. Healthy Foods, Healthy Lives funds, programmatic work, the Center for Public Health Research Disparities, Cura is a funder, INE is a funder. So can we identify ways to align our work through funding mechanisms as well? One of the conversations we had was, where's the community influence in all of this? Which is really central, right? We tried to make it central. So these outcomes are community defined agendas, and how are we translating that out to the work of the university, and how are we bringing that university research and expertise back into the community?
You touched on it. Where's the community voice in this, and how is it, ingrained and embedded in the structure of this model? And you've started to address that at the end of your presentation. I want to, when your expression around engineered functional interdependence struck me, and I want to encourage you to think more about what that looks like from a model perspective, because I think it would be applicable for the work of the other groups as well. When I was listening into some of the conversations, this idea of a project to lead change is something we can wrap our minds around, but it's also something we've all gone through before. What's then the change management strategy after the project is implemented? How does this then start to ossify itself so that it really changes the organizational culture and practice? And your way of approaching this and thinking about making this engineered interdependence starts to address that in a way that I think that a lot of the groups were struggling with. And that's that, how do we make this stick after we've implemented this project? And I think that's a goal that all the groups share.
When we retitled it, we entitled it Cohesive Shared Outcomes Agenda. So to me, that was part of that. Interdependence relies upon that outcomes agenda as a way of aligning the work that we do. Would you take it a step further than that? Or?
There's got to be an interest on the part of the group, whether it be through funding or shared outcomes, reportability around those outcomes, in sustaining the network that you're structuring here after the initial project has been implemented. So how do we build in mechanisms that tap into the self-interest of these disparate units to want to make them sustain this until a point where it starts to change the organizational structure and the way that we approach these issues. So I think you're thinking about that in ways that I haven't heard yet from some of the conversations in the other groups.
Many communities need funding to do the work around food justice, and I say that again coming from equity. So are you connected to the urban gardens on the north side, and how do you help in some projects so they get some money? Or, you know, there's an org that my students work with called Gardening Matters. Like, those are community groups could really benefit, and you'd learn community strategies as well. So that's more central.
Those are organizations that I would say are central to the work that we're doing as we define out that community agenda. So I would say that some of these organizations that I identified feel comfortable in saying that we have identified a number of those really key community partners, but I know there are more to look for.
I think it really use funding, because
Yeah.
it's hard for them.
I mean, it's powerful how you've visually represented the different outcomes that can come from work on food. I guess what I'd add is the power of food as, you know, it's something all people have to eat every day, right? And people, there's food that's meaningful to people, you know, no matter what. There are things that have emotional resonance for us, and, you know, so that as you're thinking about building relationships and building collaborations and, you know, the hub and how does this all work, I mean, I think you have a distinctive asset in a way in the focus on food, because they're a way to have human conversations about food even before you then start strategizing how do we advance those outcomes.